Hi and welcome to this DCP web tutorial. In today's tutorial we're going to be using Blender 2.81 to create a cloth simulation which looks similar to this. Okay, let's go ahead and open up Blender. I'm using version 2.81, so it's the latest version of Blender. If you don't have that installed, I'll put a link in the YouTube description so you can download and install this latest version. I'm going to go ahead and click General here. We're going to create a general scene. We've got a camera, a light source and a cube. So I'm going to middle mouse click. In fact, before I do that, I'm going to turn on my screencast keys. So you don't need to do this, but this will just show you what keys I'm pressing in the bottom left hand corner. And I'm going to middle mouse click and rotate around so the X and the Y, or the red line and the green line, are in this direction. Let's click on the cube and delete that. We don't need it. And we'll click on this light source and delete that as well. And we'll go to File, Save As, and let's just save our work. So I'm just going to call this cloth -01. Let's save this. And one thing you need to do is go to Edit, Preferences, and inside Preferences go to the add-ons, and inside there search for Image, and make sure you turn on Import Export Images Planes. We might use that, I'm not sure, but let's turn it on. You should have that on as default anyway. We probably won't use that in this tutorial, but in the next tutorial we're probably going to look at using that. Click here and click Save Preferences, and the first thing we're going to do is add our text. So let's go ahead and press Shift A. I'll normally use the Move tool, leave it on the default, the Move tool, and then we'll press Shift and A and we'll insert some text. So in this text here, I'm going to press number 7. Number 7 takes me into the top view. I'm just going to use the mouse wheel to rotate and zoom in. Hold down the Shift key in the middle mouse to pan the viewport, right? And we'll press the Tab key. So hit the Tab key or go to Edit Mode up here, Edit Mode, and we're just going to delete this text. And I'm going to type in something like, let's type in showcase. So you can type in anything you like. I'm just going to type in the word showcase. You can put your company name, whatever you want. Type that in there. I'm just typing this in as an example. So we've got the text here. We're going to click on the object data for the text here. And the first thing we'll do is go to the horizontal here and set it to center. And the vertical, we set that to center. So our origin point, the little orange dot in the middle, is in the center of this text. If we want to rotate or do anything with it, it will rotate from the center point, which is a good thing. Next thing we want to do is change the font. So let's click on this font option here, and we need to download a font. So I'm going to open up the web browser, and I'll put a link to this font in the YouTube description. So if you check the description, you'll have a link directly to this font. We'll click the download button. Let's just drag this to the side. And in this folder, I'm going to drag the zip file, and we will right click on this and extract it here. So let's delete the zip file. We don't need that anymore. And inside this folder, we should have the font. We don't need these files either. So we're just left with the font. So let's go back to Blender, and we want to change the font. So let's click on regular here, click on the open folder. And we'll go back to, as default, Blender will take you to all of the fonts in your directory. We want to go to the folder, go into here and select the font we just downloaded, and now you can see the text has changed style, the font style. Let's scroll down, and in the character spacing, I'm going to set it to 1.2. I just want to space out the characters slightly more. I'm going to middle mouse click and rotate at an angle. Any angle will do really. You just want to see the height of the text, and we want to add, let's see, geometry. And we want to extrude it. So I want to set it to something like 0.2. So the extrusion, so you can see the thickness of the text now. And we'll set a bevel of 0.02. So we've got a nice beveled edge here. Let's go to File, Save As, and save this as version 2. So it'll be cloth 02. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is really line up our camera. So let's press number 1 on our keyboard. Number 1 will take us into the front view. Let's use our mouse wheel to zoom out a little bit. Let's just make sure my screencast keys are still turned on. Let's turn them on. Okay. So we'll press number 1. That takes us into the front orthographic. And we want to rotate this text. So let's click on this text. Go to the object data here. And in the X rotation, we'll set it to 90. So now that text is facing what our camera would see. We want to move the text above this red line. So let's zoom in a little bit. We've got the Move tool selected. We'll click on the blue arrow and drag it so there's just a tiny little gap above this red line. Think of the red line like the floor in a way, right? We want to move it up a little bit more, maybe to about here. So there's a little gap here, right? We want a little gap. Now let's use the mouse wheel and zoom back out again, and hold down the shift key to pan the viewport, and you want to try and get this middle point here in the center of the screen. Then press Control Alt and 0. Control Alt 0 will move the camera to this front view, so the camera is now looking at the text from the front, but it's not positioned ideally. So let's click on the camera. We'll click on the camera, go to the object data, set the X location for the camera to 0, so it's nice and centered now. And then we can just move the camera backwards, and we can move it up slightly. We want to be looking down at this text slightly. We'll probably want to see the top edge of the text, so let's rotate downwards to, let's say, 85 degrees, and then move the Z-axis up a little bit. And now you can see just like the top edge of the text, that's kind of what we want. We should move this camera back a little bit. We can adjust this afterwards. It's not essential that it's perfect, but try and get it into a really good position. Something like this would be good. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is add a floor to the scene. So let's just go to the viewport here and press Shift and A and add a plane here, plane. So here's just a simple shape plane. We're going to press the letter S to scale and then move our mouse outwards to create a floor. Now make sure that the floor goes past the camera view, right? So you want to make sure it sits around here somewhere, so it's past the camera view. This square box is the camera, right? You can see there, so the floor sits outside. Let's go to File, Save As, and save this as version 3. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is add actually another plane. So really we should label these, right? So let's label this plane, let's call it floor. Let's give it a good name. And we want to add another plane which will actually become our material. So let's press Shift A and insert another plane. Let's just drag it up a little bit. And we want to rotate it so that it's facing the camera. So let's go to the object data for this plane, and we're going to rotate it on the X-axis, right? So let's rotate it around. We should rotate it 90 degrees here, and we want to scale it. So let's scale it on the X so that it goes past the camera viewport. So you can see the camera around here. We want to make it wider than the camera, and let's scale it on the Z-axis, the height, I believe, or actually it'll be on the Y-axis. Let's scale it on the height. Let's just see what's going on here. So where you can see the material is going below the floor, which is okay because we're going to make this floor collision. So let's just press 0 again, and we're going to move this object backwards, right? So we want to move it up a little bit, and you want it to really be under the floor here because we're going to make the floor collision afterwards. So what we want to do is let's click on this plane. Let's call this material. In fact, we should call it cloth. Yeah, let's call it cloth, and let's press 0. 0 takes us back into the camera view. We'll click on this this cloth material, or this, yeah, it's written cloth here, and we want to go to Object Edit Mode. And what we want to do is let's see, we want to subdivide this, right? So let's see, let's go to Edge and Subdivide, and we do that once. If we click here, down here in the bottom, we can subdivide multiple times, and we want to subdivide let's see, probably something like 12 times like this. In fact, we set it to number of cuts is 10 here. Alright, and then left click, and that will just give us segments here. We're going to subdivide it again one more time afterwards. So let's go back into, let's see, in fact, let's do one thing in here. Okay, so we need to make sure that all the vertices are deselected. So if you press the letter A twice, if you press it once, it will select everything, yeah? So you can see the all orange dots. If you press the letter A twice quickly, or just left click outside of the vertices around here somewhere, if you left click, it will deselect everything. And we want to deselect, but we want to select this top edge, this very top edge. So hold down the left mouse button and use the square box selection tool as default, and just select the top edge here, just this top edge right here, all these vertices. And we're going to go to the vertices group here, and we're going to create a vertex group. Let's click the plus sign and double click where it says group and call this something like top edge. Just type it in one word, top edge, like this, and then click assign. Okay, Now let's go back into the object mode, and what we would do is we want to subdivide this material again one more time. So let's click on it, and let's go to the modifier. Let's click, in fact we can probably do this afterwards. What we want to do now is really create some sort of armature to hold this material in place. So what we'll do is let's click on the material, this object, this cloth object. Let's press Shift A and insert a, let's see, we want to insert a armature here, armature. So we've got this bone, it's called a bone, right? And we're going to click on the blue arrow to drag it up. And we're going to drag it right to the top edge here. And then we're going to click and drag it to the top corner here. So we need to double check that it's positioned quite well. So let's hold down the Shift key and zoom in. And let's just see where it's sitting. You can see it's sitting just off the top edge. Let's just drag it down a little bit and drag it across. So it's sitting nicely there. And we can middle mouse click and we can see roughly where it's positioned. We can see it ain't quite right. So let's just eyeball this and drag it up here. And we'll just zoom in and see where it's sitting. That should be really quite close to that top edge now. So you just need to make sure it's sitting nicely in this top corner. So I reckon we can position that a little bit better. What we could do is use wireframe. And with wireframe we can get a bit more accurate, right? We can actually see through the object. That will be the very top edge there, right there. And we can go back into solid view and that will be the top edge. So what we want to do now is go into edit mode, and we want to make sure that the armature is selected, so click on it. In fact what we'll do is click, let's see, okay, what we need to do is click on the main bone part here. It will highlight yellow like this. We want it to highlight yellow. Let's press number 1. That takes us into the front view. So make sure you click on the bone here rather than just the point at the top here, right, or the bottom. We want to click on the bone. That will highlight the whole object. Press Shift and D and then hit the enter key. That's going to duplicate the object. Let's use the move tool. So now we've got 2 bones, right, and we're going to move this one to the opposite side. So we need to have it sitting here. And let's just zoom in and we can go into wireframe again. We can just drag it to the top corner here as well, like this. Let's go back into object mode and zoom out. So really we've got 2 bones. Think of these like hands, and these hands are going to hold the material at the top, and then the rest of the material can be quite, you know, it will flow quite well underneath. But we use these to move the actual material across the screen, because we're going to have it moving over this text. It's kind of revealing this text in a way, you can think of it that way. Let's go back into solid mode. Okay, the next thing we need to do is parent the cloth material to these armatures. So let's go ahead and click on the cloth. Click here on the cloth here. And then hold down the control key and then click on the armature afterwards. So the cloth should be highlighted red. You can see it's highlighted red, and then the armature is highlighted this yellow color after. So you must select them in that particular order. Then hold down the control key, move your mouse to the viewport, press Control and P. And then you want to parent with automatic weights here. Parent with automatic weights. Okay, so you can see now that the cloth is being parented to these armature, but if you click on this little arrow here, it will expand. You can see the cloth here. So left click outside and then click on the cloth here, and then go to the physics settings and select cloth here. So inside these options here, we want to set the, let's see, let's set this correctly. We don't want to use the cache at the moment. We need to find the pin group in here. So under shape here in the pin group, select the drop down and select top edge here, top edge. Okay, so now inside of the quality steps, we want to set this to 10, a value of 10, and pretty much everything else should be okay. We should be able to leave pretty much everything else as it is. So let's click on our floor, click on the floor and set that to collision. right? Because we want the material to hit the floor. Now, if we go back to our cloth and let's set our end frame to 120. So set the end frame here to 120, and then let's go to the cache, and inside the cache set the end frame here to 120, and let's just click Bake All Dynamics, and now you can see the cloth material hitting the floor. Can you see? Right, it's not looking amazing at the moment, but we'll fix that as we go along. It's quite we'll sort that out. Okay, so we also want to make this text collide with the cloth, because as the cloth drags across the text, we want that to have an effect on the cloth as well. So what we'll do is click on the text. In fact, what we can probably do for now is hide the cloth material. So just hide it, use the eye to hide it so we can see the text a bit more clearly. Let's just move in towards this text. So we want to convert this text into a mesh object. So let's go to Object, Convert to, Mesh from Curves, this one. So I think that's correct. Let's go into edit mode, and now we can see it's a mesh object, right? You can no longer edit the text when you do that, but we can now click on this text and go to the physics settings and set it to collision as well. And if we go back to our cloth, let's turn it back on. And if we go to delete the bake here, so go to the physics settings, delete the bake and rebake it, you can see it's taking a lot longer to bake now, right? Because it's interacting not only with the floor, but it will also interact with this this object behind it. Can you see now, right? So it's colliding with this object, so it's not amazing, so we'll sort that out. So first thing we want to do really is delete this bake, and we want to move the armatures, right? So let's click on the armature, let's click on the move tool, and let's bring that object forward in front of the text. We want it to be sitting in front of the text, not behind it. And what we want to do, let's see, we want to subdivide this material. So let's click on it and go to the materials modifier, properties here, and go to add modifier. Make sure you click add modifier and subdivide here, and set the subdivision to values of 3 here. So now we can see it's more subdivide, so we should get a better effect in terms of the how the material flows, right? And the other thing we want to do is click on the move tool and drag this material just above the floor, somewhere around here. Let's press 0 on our keyboard. 0 will take us back into the camera view, right? So let's just drag it down. Let's see. We'll probably have it right above the camera. Actually, let's be careful, right? We want to move the be careful, so undo that. You want to move the armature, not the material. So you want to move the armature up and down, not the material itself. Let's see. So we want it probably about here, just above the camera view. We could probably bring it forward a bit more as well, to somewhere like here. So this is our camera, and our material is going to drop down and hit the floor. So let's animate that. Let's go ahead and click the record button, and we'll click on the armature, and let's go to the location. Let's press press the letter I here on the location, and press the letter I here on the rotation. Now let's move to frame 30, and let's drag this armature down. Now because it's cached, you're not really going to see the movement here. So what we need to do is go to the armature, go to the cloth, go to the material, or the physics setting, sorry, and we need to click Bake All Dynamics just to see what happens here. So now you can see the cloth moving down like this. You can see how it's folding because we subdivided it quite a few times. You can see it looks a lot better. Let's just right click on this cloth, and in fact let's actually click on the cloth here, go to Object, and we'll do Shade Smooth. So that will make it nice and smooth now. So the cloth's going to drop down, and then it's going to move backwards across the showcase, and then maybe we'll leave it in the background, or we'll do something. Let's see. So let's go ahead and click on the armature again, so we can see the armatures here. We'll move across, and then at around frame 80, it's quite a distance, it's almost, you know, let's see, maybe at frame 90, around 2 seconds, something like this. In fact, that might be a bit too much. Let's do frame 80. Let's just click here, and we want to drag the armature so that it's behind the text, sits behind it, right? Maybe a bit further, something like this. So we can see how that works by clicking on the cloth, go back to the physics settings and delete the bake and rebake, and then press 0 on your keyboard to see the camera view. And let's see, so that material gets pulled over the, let's see how, see, it hasn't gone far enough, right? Can you see it's still sitting over the material hasn't been pulled far enough. So we can fix that by going back to the armature, and we'll go to this frame 80. We might increase our frames actually and do that movement a bit slower. I think it needs to come down lower as well, the material. So let's fix that. Let's go to here and let's set it to something like, what are we going at? 30 frames, right? Probably. So I reckon 180, let's see, 180 divided by 30 will give us 6 seconds. So we'll probably want about 8. So let's do 30 times 8 should be 240. So let's set this to double, basically 240 frames. So we've got more frames to work with. I want things to, with the cloth you want it to move a bit more slower rather than fast. So it's probably this 1 second duration is not long enough. So what we do is click on this keyframe here, and let's just drag it to, let's be a bit careful here. Let's left click to deselect all the keyframes and take this keyframe and move it to frame 60. Frame 60. So that's the one that comes down. So this movement downwards is going to be a bit slower now. It's not going to be so fast. And then the movement back, let's click on this keyframe and drag it to something like 160. So we want it to go quite slow over when it moves over the text. So really I want this material to drop lower. So I'm going to click on this armature and bring it down more. Bring it down more. Let's see. Probably a little bit further to around here. And with the movement back, let's go to this keyframe here. It's probably worth pressing number 3 so you can see it from the right orthographic. Now you can see how far the material has been pulled over. We know we need to move it a lot further back, so let's move it almost to around here. So we know that it's actually dragged over the material, or the material is dragged over the text by that point, right? Now we just need to rebake it to see what it looks like. So let's click on the cloth, go to the physics settings, and we'll delete the bake and bake all dynamics. We've only set it to 120 frames here. We need to delete this bake and set it to, let's see, where's the frames here? End frame 240. Set it to 240. Let's turn off the record button and let's click bake all dynamics. And now we can see that cloth floating down. It's going to float quite low, pull over the text, and then it will stop here somewhere, right? Let's see that from the camera view. Okay, pretty cool. Right, so we haven't dealt with any sort of lighting or anything, so we'll do that in a moment. But what we'll do now is click on the armature again, and we've got a couple of options. Maybe we can have this cloth flow back over the text and then flow out the screen. I think that would look pretty cool. So let's go to frame 200, somewhere around here, and let's press number 3. Number 3 takes us back into the right orthographic. Let's hit the record button, and we'll move this cloth or this armature in front of the text again to around here. And then on frame 240, let's drag this out of the camera view. So it's better to do that from pressing 0 so we can see it from the camera perspective. We want to drag this material way up here somewhere, or drag the armatures up, right? Let's go back to the cloth, go back to the physics settings, delete the bake and rebake again. And this time, if we go back to the first frame, we should kind of see everything happening now. Let's zoom in a little bit. So depending on the speed and the movement of the armature, you know, the cloth might move quite fast, but I'm okay with that, you know. I think it looks okay. Now it's for you to experiment really with this. It's really learning the techniques, and then you can go and experiment and play around with it and do what you want. So let's leave it like that. I could improve it, but I think it's okay as a good demonstration how to do this. And now we just want to add some materials and add some lighting to make this look a lot better, right? Let's go to File, Save As, and let's save this as version 4. Okay, so we're going to add some lighting. Let's minimize this, open up this folder. Let's create a new folder and call it HDRI. Let's spell that correctly. HDRI. We're going to open up the web browser and we're going to go to this website called HDRI Haven. I'm going to put a link to this material in the YouTube description. So we'll click 4K here. And let's open up the HDRI folder and drag that 4K HDRI image in here. Let's click on the logo, let's scroll down and go to Browse 200 here. And when we click there, you can go and pick some other ones. So don't use this only specific one, download maybe 2 or 3 of them and try and see which ones work well. You can see the latest ones are up here at the top. And maybe we'll pick one other one, let's just see. Let's click more. Let's pick something else as well. Let's go for maybe, let's see. This is the one we're using right now, so let's try this one as well. So I'll put a link to this one in the YouTube description as well, so you can download the same ones I'm using or download some other ones, but I think this Shanghai one works pretty well in terms of colors. Let's close this and close this. Let's go back to Blender. Let's go to the we want to go to the shading here and press the letter 0. That takes us into the camera view, and right now we want to go to the world settings. So you should see 2 little nodes here. If you don't see them, use the mouse wheel to zoom out and you'll be able to see them, and then you can just middle mouse click to pan around to get them into this sort of position here. I'm just going to reduce the size of this window on the side here. So this is the world output and this is the background. So we're going to press Shift and A and insert Shift A, insert shader, background. We want 2 backgrounds here. Press Shift and A and insert a mix shader and drag it to the top here so it connects between these 2, and then drag this background to here like this. Let's go into our render view and let's press Shift and A, and we want a texture, environmental texture here. Connect the color to the color here, then press Shift A and we want a vector mapping here, and we'll connect the vector to the vector here. Then let's zoom out a little bit. We want to press Shift A, import texture coordinates, connect the generated to the vector here, and then press Shift A, import light path. And the is camera ray right at the top here, we want to connect that to the factor over here. Now click the open button and go to the HDRI folder and click any of these 2. I'm going to click the, let's click the Shanghai one. This is the one that I like, so let's click open, and now we can see some lighting inside our scene, but we don't have any materials applied to our object, so we need to do that next. So let's go back to the layout, let's go to the render view, let's go to File, Save As, and save this as version 5. Okay, so let's go ahead and click on this text object here, and let's go to the materials, and we've got the text is labeled text, so that's fine. So let's just copy this word text. We don't even need to copy it. It's called text here, so click on the material, click new material, and name that material text. It's always worth naming the materials the same as what the objects are, so you can find them later quite easily. And let's set the metallic all the way to the top, and let's bring down the roughness to around let's see, around 0.175. So now you can see the text here will pick up the lighting from our HDRI. We've got this nice sort of silvery shiny text, right? Now let's click on the floor. This is our floor. Let's double click and copy this name. Control C to copy, go to the material, click new material and paste in that name, call it floor, and we want to set that to metallic as well and bring down the roughness. We want to set this to around 2.5, 2.07, let's say to 0.25, somewhere around there. And then we want to go to our render properties and we want to turn on the bloom. Let's turn on ambient inclusion. Let's turn on screen space reflections, and in the volumetrics we want to turn on volumetric shadow, and let's go to, let's see, shadows here, and make sure it's soft shadows is turned on. Yeah, so that should be good. And in the render we want to set this to 120 samples. Viewport doesn't matter too much. We can increase that maybe to 60 for now, but that's just in the viewport, right? We just see things better in the viewport when we're experimenting here, but you don't need to set that to a high number. But 120 should be alright for the render. Let's go to the output settings, and inside the output let's set it to 30 frames and go to file save. And now we want to add a material to the cloth. So let's click on the cloth up here right at the top. Let's go to the material settings, click new and call this material cloth. And this cloth material, let's give it a metallic and let's bring down the roughness. Now it's worth moving across the timeline to a position where the cloth is sort of bent like this, right? Or it's folded over so you can see what it looks like in terms of reflections and stuff. And let's go back to our render properties and go to the screen space reflections, turn off half trace, set the trace position high, and the max roughness, let's see, we want to set that to around 0.2, I think 0.2, something like this. And let's just move that material across our text, and let's just see. Let's bring it back to around here, this sort of position where it's creased, right? Somewhere like here is good. And let's go back to our shading. Inside our shading in the background here, we want to click and set it to black. We want black background here. Let's just see that. So that's how it's going to be. You can choose any color. You don't have to have it black, but I think black will look better. Let's press F12. So let's press Control S to save, then press F12. Let's just do one quick test render. Now you can see what the material looks like, right? We might be able to improve that a little bit by going to the max roughness. Let's see. We could set this all the way down, right? But I think play around. Really, it's down for you to play around with these settings to see what looks good for you, right? So I'll leave you to experiment with the trace position, the max roughness, and also the edge fading here as well. You can play around with as well. So you can play around with these. You can play around with the thickness, all that stuff, just to see how the reflection looks. Because remember, this is like a metallic material. It's behaving like a metallic material. So I think we're pretty much done, right? We just need to render now. One thing we can do is, let's just see, let's bring that material above the floor, or let's bring it above the camera. Let's move in towards this text here. Let's go back to our shading, zoom in on this text here, use the mouse wheel, and here in the X location we can rotate around to change the colors. So we want to change it to maybe like this nice shade of blue. If you zoom out, you can kind of see as you're rotating this X, you're actually rotating the map, the HDRI map, to pick up different colors. So you can play around with this to get a nice set of colors. Maybe you want to go gold, and that's going to affect also the material color up here at the top, right? It's not just the floor and the text, it will affect the color of the material. So I want to get something with quite a few colors in there. I quite like those blues really. Let's see. I think something like this will be okay. Let's go to the bloom settings and reduce the radius. The radius is too high. Let's bring that down to something like this. Let's see. Let's go to the layout. It's kind of like what we had before. Let's go back to the shading. Let's see. So I think around here is good. So I'm setting it to 0.4 here, 0.4. So I've got some purples and a few different lights and shades in here, which I think will look better. And then our material will pick up those colors as well. So that'll look pretty cool as well as it flows through. So let's get it to around here. Let's see what it looks like when we render from here. So I think that looks pretty cool. Quite like that idea. So let's go to file save as. And let's set it to version 6 and save it. Okay, so let's go back to our first frame. Let's go to frame 0 here, or frame 1, and let's go to our output settings. And inside our output settings, we want to set the first frame to 1, the end frame to 240, leave it on 1 step, 30 frames a second. Let's go to the drop down here and set it to AVI JPEG, and then we'll go on the open folder and click on our Blender tutorial folder, and then we can just click accept. And let's press Control, hold down the Control key and press F12. So now Blender will go and create the video sequence and render out each individual frame. You can see it's on frame 3 and 4 and 5 and so forth. So that's going to take a bit of time to finish. So what I'll do is pause the video and then we can check the animation once it's completed. Okay, so I made a little mistake. Just to make a quick note, when we just rendered out this content, basically I didn't bake the cloth material first. So we need to go to the cloth material, go to the physics settings, and make sure we bake all dynamics first. Click bake all dynamics. If you don't bake the dynamics, then it's not going to render correctly, basically. Right? So let's just delete this bake all dynamics. And let's just check how that's working. So let's just do a test frame render, F12. So we can see the material bending and doing all its good stuff. So now it should be fine. So I was just doing a test render now and I could see the material wasn't behaving correctly. So let's just press Control F12 and we'll render out one more time. And this time around it should work correctly. Okay, Blender's finished rendering out all of the 240 frames. So let's close this. Let's go to File, Save. And if we minimize this, inside this folder we should have an AVI file. Let's open that up and we can check out our cloth simulation. So let's just set that on repeat. I think we could have improved this, but overall I'm quite happy with how it's worked out. I think at the end we could have had the cloth flow over the text a bit better. We pulled it quite fast, right? So imagine the cloth is behaving in a certain way, and when we pulled it back, it was more frames, and then on the pull forward, it was less frames. So it's pulling it quite fast, so it didn't really flow over the text as I would have liked to have done. But the idea here was to learn how to use the cloth simulation in Blender, so now you can go and experiment. Maybe slow down that pullback on the frames. You can also add more weight to the material itself, right? So I believe if we go in here, if we go into the cloth simulation, delete the bake, and then you can play around with the stiffness. You can play around with a lot of the settings. Really, you've got to read through the manual and understand a lot of these settings, but you can do like self collision as well. So if the material hits itself, it will collide. You can add more weight to it, I believe, as well. Let's see, you've got tension, you've got so many different settings in here. It's quite complex. The mass of the cloth material. So I think this would affect the actual weight of it, right? The way the material moves. So let's just experiment with that. It's set to 0.3 kilograms. So let's set it to 3 kilograms. So it's going to be quite heavy. And let's just bake all dynamics. And let's see how it behaves when we give the material more weight. In theory, it should behave differently, right? See, now you can see it's like behaving a lot more differently. You can see that, right? Clearly. So it's for you to go and experiment now and play around with the settings in Blender. You can see it doesn't take a long time to bake. So you can play around with these settings and see what effects you can have on that material based on changing the mass. You can even probably put some sort of wind dynamics in here, right? You could press Shift A and you could probably put a force field, a wind force field, and that could affect the cloth material as well. So I'm going to be experimenting more with the cloth material. Just wanted to make a tutorial explaining how to use it, and then I'm going to go through a lot of these settings and see how we can manipulate the cloth in future tutorials. So let's set that back to 0.3. That's what it originally was. In fact, let's set it to something like 0.01. Let's give it a really light value, and let's bake it one more time, and let's see what happens when it's a very light material. Let's see how that affects it now. Yeah, you can see it's floating a lot more now, right? So that's not exactly what we wanted. So the original setting was pretty good. Blender's default setting 0.3, I think it was. That should be like an ideal setting for some sort of cloth material. Depends on what the material is though, right? So I'll leave you to go and experiment. Have fun with this. You can create some quite interesting effects with this as well. So it doesn't have to be like this. You can do whatever you want. This is down to you for now to go and experiment. Maybe what you could do is bring down the armature much lower. What we could do, let's have a little play anyway while we're here. So let's go to the armature. This won't take long to do. Right now it gets to this point here, so we could click here, click the record button, click on the move tool, and bring that armature right down very, very low. Let's press number 3. So we want it to be really above. Let's press number 3. We want that armature to be above the cloth, just above it, literally just above it. So you can see it's much lower now, and as it moves across, it's actually going upwards. So let's bring it to around here, and let's bring it down to like around here. So let's see, so now it's going to move across, and when it gets to here, let's see, that's all the way over here, right? Let's bring that right down really, really low, so it's almost going to float over in this sort of direction. You can kind of see it's going to move downwards, right? And then here we can bring it back down quite low. Here it's colliding with the object, so we don't really want that. Let's see, maybe around here on this frame. Where is it? Let's just bring it up a little bit here. You need to make sure the record button is on, and let's see how that looks now. So we can just run a little bake of this. Let's delete that bake, and let's set the quality steps to something like 20. Let's set it at a higher value, and let's click Bake All Dynamics. And let's see if that improves our animation. Let's untick the record button, press 0 to go into the camera view, and we click play. Kind of like what I wanted, but it's not exactly correct. So I'll leave you to go and experiment. Go and have some fun, see what you can come up with, and I'll be interested to see what work you come up with. So let's go to File, Save As. I don't want to save this as that current version. We'll save it as version 7, experimental version. Let's close this down. Let's close this. That's the end of this tutorial. I hope you had fun. I hope you learned something new as well. And I look forward to seeing you in the next DCP web tutorial.